Hello to the chicos and the chicas. After the rest day, the chess is back in the Sinquefield Cup, and I am coming at you with the next review. And today on the menu is yet another Hans Niemann game against none other than Wesley So. A very exciting battle that I'm very curious and keen to get into right away. So let's jump right into it. On the menu is the mandatory Petrov, which is nowadays the ultimate go-to opening for black, or at least one of the most frequently played ones. 95 d6, no Stafford this time round. Knight takes e4, d4, d5, bishop d3, and bishop f5. Now this is a little bit of a less frequently played variation compared to the two major moves, knight c6 and bishop d6, and even bishop e7. But this is just as reliable. Castles, bishop e7, rook e1, and knight castles, knight d2. Already I would like to highlight something about this variation that I'm going to repeat later on, and that is that as soon as people look at these positions, they go like, ah yeah, it's a draw. And actually I find it very inspiring very often to look at these games, because these positions are equal, but they're not a draw. And there is a huge difference here, and I already spoke about it in a previous recap video for this tournament, that nowadays the goal when it comes to preparing openings against absolutely the top-end grandmasters, it's not necessarily to get an advantage, it's to get a playable position. And actually recently it turned out that many of these symmetrical Petrovs are actually very playable for a win. And so despite the symmetry and despite the very similar layout of pieces on both sides of the board, actually the draw is not secured yet. So actually the middle game I found very fascinating, and the reason why I'm playing through these moves reasonably quickly is because right up to this point we have been following theory, and when I say we, I mean Wesley So, because Hans is definitely out of theory as far as his time consumption is concerned. It's kind of it's weird to draw any conclusions, and I don't want to play that game for sure about his time consumption, but it's hard to tell based on that when he was actually out of theory and how far he followed his prep. But you can most certainly tell that Wesley So was in book until now, which is really cool, because b3 is the first new move, and by the way, a really decent one. Because it makes perfect sense to cover the c4 square, prepare c4, put more pawns on the light squares. It's just a very natural move. And after knight e6, which Wesley played instantly, kind of understandable. I mean, the reason why he played knight e7 is to play knight e6. Now he started thinking. Note how his next move, he took 14 minutes. So we are now out of book, and like I said, the position is very symmetrical in its layout, the pawn structure, even many of the minor pieces seem to assume very similar positions, and yet I would definitely be very hesitant to call this a draw. Equal, more than likely, but you have to play it out, man, and that is quite a challenge very often, especially if a player is known to not perform too well under pressure, that you know it's equal, but you still have to deliver. That is a really tough challenge very often. c4, great play. Knight f6, rook d1. Very logical moves, really. g3. Now, this is a bit of an oddball. I don't like the look of it. I understand the move, sort of. But this sort of disagrees with this move with me, and the engine reckons that it wasn't quite great either. The reason why I dislike it, because it creates an awkward position for the e5 bishop, where there is no retreat point for it at all. I think Hans's idea in general was that if the bishop was to be challenged, he wouldn't worry about trading it for a knight and then reinforce the e5 square with f4. So I can make a case for this being an aggressive idea. It also supports h5, which will be played later. But the positional impression it gives me is just like, I don't know if I would have done it. Anyway, g3 was played. a6 was played. Rook e2, a very cool move. It often sort of suggests the idea of doubling up on the e, creating a few tactical concepts along the e file, but also it removes the rook from this pesky bishop b4 move that comes up actually quite a bit in this line. Rook e8, h4, very cool. Let's expand on the king side a little bit. Knight h5. And this was the most exciting moment in the game. And in many ways, especially for those who are into various kinds of theories, you know what I'm talking about. This would have been a very telltale sign, or I don't know, to draw conclusions, because in this position, actually white has a move that keeps the balance. But white is already decided needs to watch out, because the bishop on e5 is actually in quite a bit of trouble. f6 is almost trapping this bishop. And Hans's solution to the problem was to take, which is still okay, and after take to play knight g2. And this is a blunder according to the engine, and it's easy to see why, because now after f6 we don't have an adequate resource in order to secure the bishop. He actually ended up with the absolutely astonishing bishop b8, but as much as it's astonishing, it's also rather bad, and that was actually the reason why the game went sideways for the young American. Now, what is this key moment I'm talking about? Believe it or not, in this position, the absolutely insane pawn b4 actually holds the equal T, and with that a potential draw as well. The idea behind this absolutely ridiculous looking move is twofold. First of all, or rather three even, if the bishop takes, we take d5, take back, and queen b3 creates a double attack. We gobble up the d5 pawn, and all of a sudden black's position falls apart, and white is winning. 100%, that's GG, game over, on your bike, whichever you prefer, it's all over Red Rover. So that's the first mind-blowing thing. Second, after dc, queen takes c4, all of a sudden the IQP can't be stopped, it's not blockaded, and with a d5 break pending, white's far more active pieces actually dominate the board, and again, white is enjoying the upper hand. Actually, after this, I think takes, and rook e1 with the threat of knight d5 creates a major headache for black. White again is clearly in the lead, so that is also absolutely amazing. And here comes the real deal, the third part of the equation, which is perhaps the hardest to see when discussing b4, is that after f6 we have got this absolutely mental variation. Takes, queen b3 again, simply ignoring the bishop on e5, and after taking on e5, white just plays knight takes d5, and actually white is winning according to the engine. Now this pin, or semi-pin I should rather call it, is just way too much of a pain to bear. Knight g7 de. Now the queen is indirectly under attack due to the check and then the capture on d8, and after something like king h8, knight f6, white still nets some material one way or another. Actually, the very interesting queen sack is probably the best way for black to play. When black has got rook 2 minors for the queen, but white has got 2 extra pawns, and the black king is rather weak. There is no proper coordination amongst the black pieces. White is still clearly ahead. So this mind-blowing variation with queen b3, leaving the bishop on prey on e5, and then creating the counterplay on the diagonal against the weakened king, would have kept the game in balance. This is one of the most ridiculous ideas I have seen in recent games that was not played and recommended by the engine. It's just like, wow, man, what a move. Like, who would think about something like that? It's absolutely insane. I didn't watch the commentary, by the way, so I don't know if this came up or not, but absolute bonkers. And actually, after CD that was played in the game, b4 is still the best move with the exact same idea, and that move keeps the balance. Now, unfortunately for Hans, he instead played take knight g2, and after f6 now, he really needs to work very hard to hang on to at least one half of the point. Bishop b8 was played. Now, obviously, rook takes rook e6 is very good for white, but Wesley So went like, nay, brother. I will defend this. You do whatever you want to do with that. g4, queen b8, takes h5, and knight f4. And now we are essentially by force landing in this, I can almost call it an endgame scenario, where the white pawns have been split apart. All of them are on black, against the dark squared bishop, this does not bode well. So now Hans has got his work carved out for him, and unfortunately, upon entering this endgame, he actually really badly failed to defend this game as best as it could have been done. Note here the time difference. I didn't even notice it when I prepared for the recording. Right now, Wesley So has got 40 minutes on the clock versus Hans's 30. Let's see what happens in a matter of a few moves. King f7, queen e3, bishop f4. Now Wesley So's time is really disappearing. Or I thought it was. Another 5. So now he's already down on time compared to Hans Niemann. Note, by the way, that in general the strategy would be to try to trade queens in a way that unites the black pawns. So that optimally is accomplished by this. This would be an instant win for black, because now the isolated pawns are extremely exposed, and at the same time the black pawns are perfectly in one chain. So this is the objective that black wants, and here actually white missed the golden opportunity of a very difficult and very inhuman equality / draw to go for with knight e1. Now this is one of the ugliest moves I've seen in a long time as best move in a position, and the idea is quite unique. The concept is that after queen h4 I play queen c8. Now the pestering of the pawns is very annoying, so the best black has is to check the queen back to the center and then defend the pawns. And perhaps Hans saw it this far and evaluated it to be dead loss due to being a pawn down, but here comes the twist. Now the queen slides over to h8 and is now threatening to pester the king and these pawns with quite a number of checks. And if I play queen f8, then comes the last twist in the story, queen h3, and the queen has completed this marvelous triangle. Well, actually I went to see it from here, but it feels like I'm doing a triangle anyway. And now white is threatening both penetrations, and that actually secures a draw. Additionally to that, if black dodges that, there comes the next bit where this knight actually gets rerouted to e3 to a shockingly effective spot, and it's likely to pick off the d5 pawn, thus restoring material parity. Absolute bonkers variation. Absolutely bonkers. Instead, Niemann fell apart actually here very quick. King g2 check. Now So's time is really low, by the way. Queen f5. He's trying to find a way to crack the position, but he fails. And I think that Niemann here has actually got a little bit too confident about holding the draw, because Wesley was clearly spending a lot of time and clearly not making progress. And here I think that Hans moved too fast and fell into a tragic trap with king e2, allowing his opponent now to force the queen trade under favorable circumstances. Bishop h2 was the winner. I think what Hans must have overlooked, that he only looked at bishop f4 when take and then knight h3 followed by f3. I would say, yep, the engine confirms. Still looks like a drawable scenario, although I find this very unattractive too. But even better was the text bishop h2 first, kicking the knight, and then bishop f4. And now this really does bruise white, because after takes the knight is attacked with the tempo, and the knight is also dominated by the bishop, so it only has 2 squares. Neither of them are sufficient to hold, because now the black king just walks up and gobbles up the d4 pawn. So that was a tragic blunder really by white, in a position that was difficult, but I reckon doable to hold. And now Wesley So just very cruelly cashes in on Hans's mistake, provokes the pawn move, and now the pawn becomes too far advanced and too loose. Bishop e3, king d5 is already a game-winning threat. King e5, patience is a virtue, denying knight f4, so king d5, knight f4 would have been a bad mistake. King e5 instead dominates the knight, prepares bishop b8, and then take on d5. d6 was played, and now takes knight f4, and g5 secures the pawns, the extra pawn, and now Wesley converts with ease, defends the pawn, defends both pawns, and now he goes in after a little zugi for the f2 pawn as well. And this is just carnage. Knight c4 takes, and even the check is not going to be good enough, because after the casual king f4, the bishop is immune due to check takes, and then the black king will nurse the pawn in. And that was all she wrote. A very fascinating, really awesome battle between the two young Americans. I really enjoyed the to and fro in the middle game, where for a while it looked like it was Niemann who was having the upper hand in this Petrov, but then this bishop got a little bit too uncomfortable by the too many pawns on the dark squares and ended up in this very awkward b8 square. But boy, this b4 source would have been all over the news, I reckon. So yeah, very, very fun game. Good to watch. It seems now like Wesley So is the #1 candidate for winning the tournament. So we are looking to see an exciting finish with 3 more goals, 3 more rounds to go. So that was it for me from today. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to comment, to like, to sub, do those YouTubey things for me, please. And I'm going to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.